Vamos a cerrar este bloque de mesas en inglés,
Sí,
doctor Vergés, con la Agencia Europea del Medicamento. Es un tema realmente apasionante. Creo que ya tenemos la comunicación con la señora Mavris, pero bueno, dejo al doctor Vergés que haga la presentación y luego también el doctor Xavier Carné y luego intentaremos recuperar el tiempo de la manera que nos sea posible. Adelante, muchas gracias.
Gracias. Thank you very much. Well, I would like, to present Dr. Maria Mavris. She's responsible from the European Agency of Drug of the patient relation and engagement. I think she's a very intelligent woman and a lot of capacity, and she's in charge of this important issue in the European Agency of Drugs. That for us is very important, no? Because it's the responsible for all the drugs approvals in Europe. And, the EMA for years, they're taking care about the patients. And we have very good relation with EMA for years. And I'm sorry because we changed to you the time. I apologize for that, Maria. But, thank you to stay with us. We really appreciate. And also, the chairman, Dr. Xavier Carné, do you know Xavier? He's a clinical pharmacologist, and he has a lot of experience in the managing of patients, and he will ask to you some questions, and please, when you want, you can start it. And thank you very much to be here.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, very well.
It's
Lovely.
fine.
Thank
It's
you.
fine,
Good
Maria.
morning, buenos dias, everybody, and my apologies that I cannot be there in person. I hope maybe in the future I'll be able to attend. I'm going to just share my screen now, and hopefully you can see my presentation. Great, so I will begin. So thank you for the very nice introduction, and I will talk to you today about the European Medicines Agency, that we always refer to as EMA, and it's one of the first of many acronyms that you will hear today. So I will try to do my best to not use too many acronyms. So I work in the Public and Stakeholders Engagement Department at the European Medicines Agency, and I'll tell you a little bit about everything, about what the agency does and also what we do in our department. So the European Medicines Agency was created in 1995, and so it's 27 years old, but in January it will be 28. And so we work with about 800 staff members here in Amsterdam, and we work with experts from all across Europe. So the experts are from national agencies, national medicines agencies, like your own in Spain at the AMPS, and also with clinical experts, academics, but also patients and healthcare professionals make up these experts from across Europe. How we work with these experts is in part in scientific committees, and this is where you see all of the acronyms, so I will explain to you. We have this first committee called the Human Medicines Committee, then we have the Veterinary Medicines, Medicines for Rare Diseases or Orphan, Herbal Medicines, Pediatric, Advanced Therapies, and the last committee is the Safety Committee. And so here we also have a management board where we have people, patients represented on here, as well as doctors and one veterinarian. So as a medicines agency, what do we do? And we do the same as what your medicines agency do in your own individual member state, in your own country as well. So we facilitate the development and access to medicines, evaluate applications that are submitted by companies, by pharmaceutical companies, or developers of medicines when they're asking for marketing authorization. We monitor the safety of medicines across the entire life cycle, and we also provide reliable information on human and veterinary medicines to patients and healthcare professionals. As I've already said, we work really as part of a network with all of the national regulatory authorities, as well as the European Commission, and this is also very important. So we make up part of the European Medicines Regulatory Network. So what is the difference then between the European Medicines Agency and the National Medicines Agency. So as I said, the EMA was created in 1995, and along with that came what is called the centralized procedure for authorization. Now, this is in contrast to the national procedures, which is via the member states. These procedures still exist, but there are certain medicines that must go through the centralized procedure. And I'll tell you a bit about those in a moment. But the medicines, what is the advantage of the centralized procedure? Well, the medicines are authorized in all the EU member states at the same time. So one application giving you giving the companies the ability to put on the market in 27 member states all at the same time, rather than going one by one by one by one. There's a centralized safety monitoring. So once the medicines are on the market, we continue to interact with the whole regulatory network to make sure that the medicine remains safe. We provide information in all EU languages at the same time. And as I've already mentioned, this gives us access to the largest network of experts in this field. We are not responsible for clinical trials, for authorization of clinical trials, nor for pricing and availability of medicines, which is at the national level. We're not responsible for advertising, patents, homeopathic medicines, food supplements and cosmetics, and we do not give treatment guidelines or provide medical advice. But what I should say, and I'm sorry, I thought it was here, is that the medicines that do go through the European Medicines Agency are medicines for advanced therapies, rare diseases, cancer, HIV, immunodeficiencies. All of these are any medicine being developed in these fields. It's compulsory to go through the centralized procedure. So definitely to come to EMA. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, we make sure that we monitor the safety of medicines that are already on the market. And how we do this is by collecting safety reports from patients, and you can do this in your own language. You can either go through your general practitioner, or you can report through your own language via a website. Also, healthcare professionals. There's also clinical studies that capture this information, medical literature, patient registries, which are very important for capturing all sorts of information. And then we can get information on safety from regulatory bodies outside of the EU, such as the American FDA or the Japanese PMDA, and then any kind of signal detection, and this is human and veterinary. This information then filters through, and it goes to the safety committee for assessment in the case of human medicines. And then this committee will discuss and decide how they're going to deal with this particular safety issue. And then they look at the marketing authorization, and either it remains the same, there might be some small changes, there might be a suspension momentarily, or it could be the medicine could be completely removed from the market. And of course, we make sure that we involve patients in this stage as well. And then this is communicated to the network, and a decision is made at the member state level or by the European Commission. But now to get to the point of this talk, which is really to tell you, so you can see that the regulatory life cycle of a product or regulation is very complicated. And it's very important to make sure that the people who are most concerned by the medicines are involved in dialogue. And this is not just, as is very often the case, it's not a tick box exercise. It's a very important exchange and dialogue and engagement with patients and also with healthcare professionals. So as I've already said, EMA was created in 1995, and very quickly dialogue started with patients. Of course, this started really with the people living with HIV. And then legislation changed, and we had patients that were involved in committees as full members. And the first committee was the Rare Disease Committee. And then from our side, we created a framework of interaction. And this is the latest version of the document here, now called the Engagement Framework, with patients and their organizations. And then from here, we created a working party to really discuss all of the important activities related to medicines, all of the important issues that are arising, concerns from the patient groups through the working party. We also have, for transparency, and I'll tell you a bit more about transparency later, but public hearings, and these are on safety. This is with the safety committee. We are trying to involve more young people, and also with COVID, we had patients engaged in crisis management, and this is continuing. We're always looking at different ways to involve and change our methodologies and improve in accordance with speaking with patients and their organizations. So this is really a very simplified version of the medicine's regulatory life cycle. We've put it into 3 phases: pre-submission, evaluation, and authorization. Underneath in the blue boxes, you can see some of the activities associated in these different phases. And then in the blue circles, you can see the committees. Orphan Committee for Rare Diseases is responsible for designating a medicine and a disease as rare. The Advanced Therapy Committee classifies a medicine as either a gene therapy, a stem cell therapy, or tissue engineered. Scientific advice is with the Scientific Advice Working Party, and etc. Pediatric investigation plan from the Pediatric Committee. And then, of course, at the evaluation phase, we have the Committee for Human Medicinal Products, plus the involvement of other committees. And then here in the post-authorization phase, where it's really the domain of the Safety Committee. And all along, you see there's patient input, either as members of committees, consulted as individual experts, and patients also review the documents that are produced at certain times along the medicine's regulatory life cycle. So who are these patients that we keep talking about, that we interact with? And primarily, we interact with certain eligible organizations. And these organizations, their logos are listed here, and these are found on our website. And if we look at this table here, these organizations have to have transparency on the funding, missions and activities. They have to represent patients. They have to have legitimate statutes. And so all of this has to be aligned with EMA, and you can find information about this on our website. But also, in addition to the eligible organizations, we interact with a lot of other organizations, and they can register in what we call our stakeholders database. But we also work with a lot of individuals, and when we involve an individual in a medicine assessment, this person has to submit a declaration of interest and sign a confidentiality undertaking. Oops, sorry about that. So here we have the different categories of patients and who they represent. I've already mentioned that there are patients on the different committees, and here I show you patients on the Rare Committee, the Rare Disease Committee, the Pediatric Committee, Advanced Therapy and Safety. And this is very important because these people are full members of the committee and make decisions, as they do in the management board, so the executive committee of the agency. Here we have the patients who represent their organizations, and this is in the Patients and Consumers Working Party, but also here we have the Healthcare Professional Working Party. So we have everything in parallel, patients and healthcare professionals. And these organizations are invited to participate in workshops and information sessions, topic groups. So next year, for example, we have discussions on shortages and antimicrobial resistance, and these are very important working parties. Here I just want to show you something that's very, very new. We have been involving organizations in the evaluation of medicines. So in this particular phase, we can involve patients when there's a committee meeting, but here we're involving organizations to gather the feedback of what it means to live with a particular disease and also the treatment options. And this is done at the point of the start of assessment of a marketing authorization application. So the information that is collected from the patients is shared, or patient organizations is shared with the rapporteurs from this committee, from the CHMP, the Committee for Human Medicinal Products. And then if the information is helpful, this will be included in the assessment report. Now, this was originally a pilot, and it proved to be successful, and so the pilot will be continued. So some of the outcomes of this pilot were to show that the rapporteurs were positive about the input received and said that the information gathered from the patient organizations was useful and contributed in 41% of cases to the first assessment report. What kind of information did patients provide? Well, it was in relation to things that the people who have studied the medical and scientific aspects of the disease can't really know about. The daily impacts, well, treatment options, of course, perspectives and perceptions of adverse effects. What are the important improvements and desired benefits for new treatments? So as I said, this is now a new methodology that is added to our extensive toolbox of methodologies for patient involvement. Another way that patients can be involved, as I've already mentioned, is as individual experts. And here I show you some of the numbers of the individual experts. They go up and down, of course, according to the different activities, but these are all medicine related, either in the early phases of scientific advice, later phases as in scientific advisory groups, or they can be consulted by committees and they review the documents that I showed you earlier. And here, if you are interested, I can also send you this, is you can register to be in our individual stakeholder database as an expert for your disease area. We did a study on the impact and the added value of patients in scientific advice procedures. We gathered 4 years of data, and this was published, and I can provide you with the link. And we showed where patients gave input into the development plan of a company. So a company that's proposing a clinical trial, they will say, they will ask particular questions on the clinical aspects, such as the population, the endpoints, whether they're using the right comparator. And we involve patients in these particular discussions. So here you can see that in almost half the cases, patients gave input into the population to be recruited, the endpoints that were meaningful to them, quality of life, the feasibility of the study, whether some aspects were just not really feasible and whether there'd be a large dropout, the standard of care and the choice of the comparator. Other insights were really the condition, the insights into the condition, the daily impact of living with this condition, and treatment options. And with patient input, there was further discussion in more than half the cases. When it comes to the impact, the Scientific Advice Working Party also provides recommendations to the companies that request scientific advice. And in 20% of the cases, the recommendations were modified based on the patient input. This is very important. But also in cases where patient input did not change the final advice, in more than 85% of the cases, the patients actually agreed with the proposed development plan. So they had a look at it and they agreed with it. This is also very important. But for us, we also do have challenges with finding patients because, of course, as you can hear from me, the language of the EMA is English, even though everyone, all of the staff are representatives from different EU member states. All of the meetings are in English and all of the documents are in English. So this is an important aspect. And also availability. People are not always available with our short regulatory timelines. It's important to also train people to participate. As you can see, it's a very complicated process and you need to know where in the process you are and also what is your role in the process. This is very important to manage the expectations. Then, of course, you're all very active discussing with the developers, and so managing conflicts of interest is also very important for us. We don't try to discourage people from speaking with industry, but of course we need one person in your organization who would be available and free from conflict to interact with the European Medicines Agency. We frequently get asked how representative is it to involve 1 to 2 patients in any of these scientific procedures. And of course, as you can see, we try to involve larger patient groups and larger numbers. And we're often asked to measure the value and the impact of patients, which is also part of the reason why we did this study that's been published. Transparency is an important aspect for us, and the agency has moved a lot towards transparency over the last 10 years or so. We request from you declarations of interest, which are published along with your CV, and eligibility criteria for organizations and publication of funding. From our side, we publish agendas, minutes and highlights of the committees. We have civil society members, so patients and healthcare professionals who are full members of committees and sit in a management board as well. We're reactivating, or we have reactivated, publication of clinical trial data, and also the transparency with the public hearing when the public is actually invited into the safety committees discussions. Finally, I just wanted to finish by telling you a little bit about another area where we're expanding, which is on collecting patient experience data. We had a workshop on the 21st of September where we discussed patient engagement, patient preferences as well, patient-reported outcomes, guidance and collection on use of patient data and digital patient-generated data. Now, all the presentations and recording, as well as a summary report, are available on the EMA website. But some of the take-home messages included that patient engagement was as an important part of patient experience data as patient preferences and patient-reported outcomes. That the European regulators welcome and want patient experience data to be part of the marketing authorization applications, that there is a need for early multi-stakeholder dialogue was raised by all stakeholders. Patient experience data is relevant at all stages of medicines development, and that developers should systematically involve patients in early stages of their development. As I've already mentioned, there's the input into the development plan, and we see at our stage of scientific advice the valuable input, so this could be gained earlier and save time. We at EMA offer scientific advice, and this could be a useful aspect, a useful avenue for developers to ask about evidence generation and use. We also have qualification procedures as well, which is to look at methodologies used and also to qualify them. Stakeholders requested joint discussions with regulators and policymakers in focus groups or multi-stakeholder platforms. And of course, there's been a request for guidance from EMA for quite a long time, but currently we work on a case-by-case basis. And then there's the International Committee for Harmonization guideline that should be coming out next year on patient experience data. In order to support your participation at EMA, we have a lot of training. We have training day, we have information sheets and videos, web pages. A lot of these things we have plans to expand and update and continue with. And also, as I mentioned, there's lots of different ways that we can consult with patients face-to-face, in the meetings, in writing, surveys, and patient preferences. So just to conclude, and I hope I am on time, engaging with patients brings the everyday aspect. And I think I've shown a couple of areas with the scientific advice paper, but also with the input from patient organizations at the Committee for Human Medicinal Products, that it really brings the everyday aspects of living with a disease into the scientific discussion, bridges the gap between clinical trial data and real-world data, and with the transparency and awareness, it improves and increases trust in the process. Once you can see what's involved and all the efforts that are being made to make sure that the evidence is robust, that the patient voice is there, it hopefully increases trust. It's important that all of this is really a stepwise approach. For EMA, it's been an approach over the last 27, nearly 28 years. We've been learning together what format works the best. We have to define roles, our role and your role, manage expectations, and ensure that the engagement is mutually beneficial for you as well as for the development of medicines. So with that, I leave you. This is my email address if you have any questions, and I believe that the slides will be circulated, so some of the links are available, but I'm also happy to take any questions at all now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Josep says that I can have a couple of comments or questions. Just to congratulate you and EMA, because the situation nowadays, as you described, I think it's in the good way. Just to remember,
I have been involved in EMA at the beginning. So I have been involved in some centralized procedures in mid-90s. And I will explain you an anecdote just to see how different the situation is now that it was then, at the beginning of EMEA at that time.
Yes.
So that was in Canary Wharf in London. So we had the meeting at CHMP, another name at that time, discussing about a drug for multiple sclerosis. All technicalities, no patient's participation, 2 days discussing. But at the same time, at the FDA, they were very advanced, very modern. So they introduced patients in their discussions. So I saw the same product discussion in Europe and in US. You know what was the participation of a patient? It was a lady, 60 years old, with multiple sclerosis, with a wheelchair, crying there in front of everybody, saying, look at me, I am a very unfortunate person to be here, but my life is a ruin. My husband left me. I am in a wheelchair. Nobody wants me. Please, please, open the door for that great drug that you are discussing. That was the participation of a patient at the FDA discussion. So at that time, my feeling was not either European model, not either Hollywood-style FDA participation of patients. So I congratulate for your situation now. I think it's much, much better, and to see that we have been improving in this road very much. But just to finalize, I think you have said something important. I have been involved in ECRIN, in the European Clinical Research Infrastructure Network, for years, and there we have participated in EUPATI training, education and training. So it's very important that patients are trained in clinical methodology, in research methodology, and jargon and things like that. And that is crucial. And as you said, and that's a problem for us in Spain, most of the patients and the language needed is English. And in Spain, the level of English of the mean population is not as good as we would like. Is it possible to open a little bit more language for other important languages as Spanish or French? Or it's a nightmare?
At the EMA, unfortunately, we don't. Firstly, thank you for all of that context. I find that very, very interesting. And just to explain, I actually came to EMA from a patient organization. So before I joined EMA, I was working for Eurordis, the rare disease organization. And like many organizations, it was one of the ones that pushed the most to have patients involved in the legislation for the orphan drug regulation, and then to have patients on the committees. And in fact, the situation you mentioned is very interesting, because that was one of the fears initially of involving patients in regulatory decisions, that they would be asking for everything to be authorized. But in fact, what they found was quite the contrast, that patients were actually very, very harsh on some of the evidence and some of the outcomes, and were not necessarily asking for everything to be authorized. So this was good, and I think we've learned from this as well. We've had dialogue with multiple myeloma patients and also with thalidomide victims with the introduction of thalidomide. And so very, very nice introduction. These were many, many years ago now. So of course, the feel and the thinking has evolved, but also the importance, as you've mentioned, which is about training. And like I mentioned, it's not only about this is the regulatory process, it's very complicated, but this is your role within there, and it's important to really inform people and to have them prepared, so they come feeling very prepared for what's expected. With regard to expanding the languages at EMA, this is very difficult. We don't actually have the current capacity to do so. We do, with the public hearings, have the ability to have translators for people who want to speak in their own language. But unfortunately, apart from, we have quite a few documents that are in all EU languages, but unfortunately these are the documents that are prepared for the outside, but the documents submitted by the companies and shared with the experts are all in English. But I imagine that you are familiar, but there is also a UPATI Spain training as well, all in Spanish. So this is also very helpful.
Thank you.
Maria, I really appreciate, Now it's better. Now it's better. Do you understand me? Yes.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
thank you for your speech. I think we have a very nice team working in the European Agency of Drugs. And for us, it's very important as a patients that take care for us. I know very well that we are doing. And in fact, when you ask to the patients, to the OAFI, go to the EMA, we did very well. And I think this is the way. This is the way, and I think, congratulations for this work, okay? And, thank you very much, for your time and for your explanation. And next year, you must be in Barcelona. This is
With pleasure.
Okay, will be nice that you stay here with us. You see the flavor of the team and for our patients and everything. We appreciate, and thank you very much. And have a nice day, and thank you for everything.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.